Good evening, everyone. I hope all of you can hear me well. Welcome to ThinkTech's virtual meetup for the summer season. This is an initiative organized by the Saudi Ministry of Communications and Information Technology. ThinkTech aims to create this stimulating digital environment and to spread digital awareness. And meetup is in that context. And we'll be discussing the topic of the growth of e-commerce in the post-pandemic world. My name is Abhijat Sharma, and I'll be the moderator of this session. As a senior manager in strategy, I'm part of the TMT practice and work across digital sectors like e-commerce and media and entertainment. Now, as all of you are very familiar with the topic, it's obviously a very exciting space. Just to sort of set some context and the boundaries, of course, e-commerce as a wider topic includes e-gov platforms, includes lots of sectors like travel, food delivery, and all of that, and can also be B2C and B2B. Just to sort of make sure this discussion and the panelists can provide more value, we have much more focused on B2C goods and services, and that's what we will be discussing because that's shown a tremendous change due to the changes in COVID. Now, I'd just to ask each of the panelists to introduce themselves. Anthony, if you can do a small introduction for yourself.
Thank you, Abhijat, and thank you to the Saudi Ministry of Communications and IT and to Speed for this exciting panel. My name is Anthony Haddad. I'm the Chief of Staff for Amazon's Middle East and North Africa operations.
Thanks, Anthony. Riyadh, if you could introduce yourself, please.
Hi, Abhijat. Thank you for hosting this. My name is Riyadh. I'm a managing director at MEVP. MEVP is a venture capital fund based in Dubai, but with a regional mandate. We invest across the region from North Africa all the way to Pakistan. And we've done several investments in Saudi, including Nana, which we announced this year. And I'm happy to be here.
Thanks. Al-Walid, if you could give a brief introduction for yourself, please.
Hello, this is Al-Walid Al-Shuair. I'm the Government and Public Relations Director at Jolly Sheikh in Saudi Arabia. Thank you all for allowing us this opportunity to contribute. And we hope that we can add value to your meeting. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Al-Walid. And finally, my friend Mazen, a quick intro from your side would be wonderful. You're on mute, Mazen.
Assalamu alaikum, everyone. I hope you all enjoying your evening. My name is Mazen Al-Darrab. I'm the founder and the CRO for Zed. Zed is an e-commerce enablement company who aims to enable retailers to move from retail to modern trade. Our main mission is to make digital commerce affordable and easy for any retailers in the region. And I'm really happy to be part of this panel.
Excellent. So thank you everyone for being here. As practice, we will run through a range of questions about what has happened to e-commerce. As we say, in the post-pandemic world. It's still not post, but hey, let's stay positive. Now, of course, it's not a new story what has happened to e-commerce due to COVID. Clearly, it has had a wide-ranging impact due to lockdowns. But I think we would want to hear from this audience, from the specialists here, about what products and service categories have seen this dramatic change. We are aware that grocery and which was a big promising category has shown a big bump, but it'll be great if some perspective can be brought in through some numbers and observations which you are having in your own individual businesses and in some cases as investors, as Riyadh, which he represents. So if I would continue to go in the same order, Anthony, if you can give us your perspective on what are you observing?
Sure, thank you, Abhijat. I think it's important to put this into context of the truly once in a century moment we're living with COVID, with impacts not just on shopping, but definitely every component of human behavior, and with advancements toward digital adoption specifically. So according to a recent McKinsey report that's come out, we've vaulted forward 5 years toward consumer and business digital adoption in a matter of around 8 weeks. So we've seen this with banks and how they reach out to customers digitally for loans and mortgages. We've certainly seen it with online grocery, as you've mentioned, with schools and how they're delivering learning online, with manufacturers, doctors and telemedicine. So shopping is just sort of one component of these truly fundamental changes. But when it comes to shopping, yes, it's had implications on how people shop to focus on their daily needs while allowing them to stay safe at home. And that's really been our priority at Amazon. In parallel, businesses have been establishing their online presence and integrating e-commerce to be able to get to their products and services to customers in light of all the lockdowns and sort of limitations to mobility. So in terms of specific categories, yes, we've seen grocery-related categories such as food, disinfectants, sanitizers, house cleaning products. During the height of the COVID peak, our number 1 and number 2 items that we're selling were water bottles and face masks. We've also seen purchases increase in lifestyle categories, including kitchen, appliances, toys, sports categories, as people spend more time at home and sort of outdoors within sort of the home environment. This really reflects the change happening around working, studying, and staying at home. And we're working with our selling partners to ensure that these products are available safely in the hands of our customers, and that we aren't running out of stock to the best of our ability to meet customer demand.
Thanks, Anthony. I think that what you alluded to, which is a very interesting part, which is your partners, right? And I mean, Amazon is an ecosystem. I would shift this actually to Al-Walid, who also represents another ecosystem by Jolly Chic. And then I was informed about the fact that they have a marketplace model as well. So Al-Walid, I'll sort of ask you to answer the next question in this, what was raised. How is the partner integration coming along in this era? Has it accelerated for you? Are more partners coming again? And what are you observing?
We're seeing a lot of newcomers, or let's say merchandise, are interested in playing a big role in the marketplace, as well as you may know that we at Jolly Chic, we have 2 different operating models. The self-operating model, which is the backbone of the Jolly Chic itself, and there is the POP model, which is a platform online plan that allows merchants to integrate with Jolly Chic and offer their product and services, where they still could have the full technical support and professional support needed.
Sure. I'm going to jump on this topic now to Mazen, and the reason is Mazen represents his model of supporting small and medium enterprises is actually about people want to setting up. So one option, of course, is to go and set up a store in Amazon or in Jolly Chic, but some people aspire to have their own e-commerce setup, and Mazen comes in there with a platform as a service model, if I might say, Mazen, right? So what are you observing? How is your business changed after COVID? How are the small and medium enterprises reacting to it from the category perspective?
That's a great question. I mean, during the epidemic itself, we realized that some people who were ready before the epidemic, they scaled up really nicely. So we witnessed a really good scale up for either brick and mortar, who used to have offline presence and the online was supporting channel. All of the sudden, their online channel became the primary, and all the employees in the company started to deliver goods, and all the marketing team effort was towards the online store. So this is one, I would say, best case scenario sampling that we are seeing. The second category of people who relied heavily on importing stuff from outside the kingdom. Those guys actually suffered since at that time the borders were not, it was really hard to ship stuff across the border from countries like China and the like. So some they sold their inventory and then they stuck by not having any other inventory. We witnessed something interesting. Some changed their offering. So they started to sell, for example, face masks and synthesizers and other, I would say, hot items that was up to sell. So this is another trend. The last trend was the way that customers perceived e-commerce got accelerated big time. So we noticed that a lot of the time was being spent for merchants to go online was not necessarily the process of going online. It was mainly just taking more time on planning and thinking, not making action. We realized that the time to go to the market or the time to go from opening your store until selling, it got reduced by 50% during the epidemic. The sales cycle went also the same, 50% decrease. The number of first order that the merchant received also got shortened. Before they took from 5 to 15 days, it got also shortened. That actually created a new, I would say, narrative for people, especially after the epidemic, to either double down on their e-commerce presence if they have offline. They start to think, how can I integrate my offline and online to make it even better? And for those who usually rely on only importing stuff from the outside, they started to think, how can I buy in bulk or how can I source from within the country? So it was not only just new categories that was after the epidemic, but also the way that people will run the business will not be the same after the epidemic.
Sure. I think that's an interesting perspective. So Riyadh, you've got a investor view on this entire situation, right? So the question to you is less about categories, but more about how are you seeing this category mix impacting business and valuations, which is what you look at.
Valuations, you said?
Valuation. So yeah, if e-commerce players which are there, you got a smattering of the entire spectrum right here in this call, ranging from SMEs to big players. How are you seeing this change with the categories, new categories emerging? Are the valuations in the market changing?
Look, during the height of the pandemic, actually during the beginning of what the world realized they were going through, I would say towards mid-March, there was a moment of shock in the system, and this affected investors' appetite globally, the stock markets, etc., and the appetite to invest also. So the first impact was, should we invest? What should we invest in? What's happening? Has the world ended? What is the world changing? And then we realized two trends from an investor point of view. One is that some digital businesses have been impacted severely, negatively, and some of them have benefited from this new, basically forced change of behavior of consumers or of humans, basically, right? So the ones that have benefited have attracted investments, excitement. The valuations have been pressured, right? I don't think any valuation, any company's valuation has increased from, if you are comparing apples to apples in terms of multiples, etc. But it's more, what are we excited about and what are we less excited about? And obviously, grocery was a big one, but there are many categories which were severely impacted negatively. Like if you look at, what has the new forced behavior impacted in terms of entertainment, like, going and watching the movies, etc. But also sports, people were doing sports at home. And other things like working from home, education, like Anthony mentioned, etc. So this has accelerated the digital adoption of these experiences, and from purchasing things online to purchasing services like education or gym classes or your yoga or your gym yoga class, etc. And I think the startups that had some the product market fit benefited the most in the growth. So we've seen those attract investment, and I think the good news for the technology sector and the startup sector is that despite everything, COVID has accelerated a trend that I think the five of us on this panel believe was going to happen anyway, which is digitizing and offering an experience, whether it is physical or not. Right, it accelerated this. There are some businesses that were affected negatively, but I think that's temporary, like travel, gym, etc. Hopefully, we're going to see some going back to normal, and some one way or another. So I don't think many will not survive, but some of them will be able to go through this period. And we've seen some investment made by investors to basically keep these businesses alive, and these came at a very discounted valuation and very realistic scenarios. Yeah.
Sure. I think very interesting point. How category divergence has actually driven some independent businesses to the ground and actually has elevated others. Interesting observation. Thank you, gentlemen. I'm going to move to the next question now, and I think my questions are very related. So I think you already started having this discussion of challenges. So, all this is very exciting, but is also a very, very massive scale up, right? I would be amused or amazed if somebody told me we were ready for this, right? No one was. So when this beautiful, joyful, or unfortunate situation hit us, what were the biggest challenges faced in delivering your goods and services to the market, and making sure that the promise which each of you stand for, whether to B2B customers, which Mazen represents, and in fact all of you represent, or the B2C customers, which obviously are buyers. So I go with the same order. Anthony, what's your perspective? What have you seen?
Yeah, I would start by saying this was certainly not anticipated, and none of the adjectives that you described, neither beautiful nor joyful, nor the third one. It's truly, it cannot be underestimated how much of a black swan event this is, and it's truly a global pandemic. That said, the silver linings that do exist are surely that customers and businesses have found their way online at a more accelerated pace than anyone on this panel would have otherwise assumed. Look, from an Amazon perspective, I think our mental model during this time has been to look at three things: safety, convenience, and customer experience. How do we make sure that we are sort of optimizing for all three of these things during a global pandemic that impacts specifically the three marketplaces that we operate in MENA, the UAE, Saudi, and Egypt? So the role of the entire retail sector is to serve customers and the community during this time. And we wanted to make sure that customers are getting the items they need when they need them. But our top priority has been the health and safety of our employees, which is why we were and continue to do everything we can to keep them as safe as possible. So specific measures we've taken, we've implemented more than 150 significant process changes to support our teams at the fulfillment center, in the office, at the last mile. The new processes entail providing temperature checks, masks, gloves, and other safety measures at our sites. We've also implemented a number of measures to ensure safe deliveries and return pickups to and from customers. These include deliveries that can be left unattended, deliveries that are placed at your doorstep with associates, maintaining a safe distance from the customer, removing requirements for customer signatures at the time of delivery, The pickup process even of returned items also follows these same measures. Customers can use e-pay methods for contactless deliveries. So we've really tried to put customer safety and our associate safety first, but we've also had to do things that we don't necessarily love to ensure that we are maintaining customer safety. We've had to prioritize essential items and goods for customers at the expense of non-essential items and goods. So we've technically had to throttle demand and extend promises for, say, non-essential items, so that our carrier network can actually prioritize essential goods and items for customers, so that they don't have to leave the house. So it's come with extreme sort of heartache and tension for us as we try to ensure that we are serving the top priorities of our customers during this difficult time.
Thank you, Anthony. That was very interesting. An adjunct question to that. Obviously, all these measures require a different logistical path, right? Because it obviously changes the dynamics of how things are delivered. Don't need numbers here, but did you see a significant increase in the costs to deliver to customers, even if you may not have passed them to the customers themselves? This change of that process and everything else?
We've certainly had to scale our operations to meet the demand, and we've had to work with a lot of last mile partners that did not necessarily have the demand for their particular services. So we had to commission on a third-party basis several last mile providers that partnered with us. It was a way for them to continue operating and for us to meet the continued growth in customer demand. So that's really how we were able to maybe nimbly address consumer demand without sort of scaling up our operations in so short a period of time, because we couldn't possibly do that to the extent that we would need to.
Very clear. Alwaleed, to transfer the question on to you, in your perspective, Jolly Sheikh, as I said, very similar model. What have you seen in terms of challenges? And of course, Anthony's covered the challenges, of changing the approach on safety and delivery. In addition, anything else you have observed which you think is important to highlight?
Thank you. Well, actually, I totally agree with what Anthony have said. But if you allow me to focus on the bright side of the pandemic and its implication on businesses. For in general, like as we all may know, that the e-commerce has been a powerful enabler and had significant positive impact on different countries while fighting this pandemic. However, it helped to maintain using the e-commerce helped to maintain the trade flows and supply needed during the economic lockdown. For us in Jolly Sheikh, this crisis pushed us to convert the challenges to opportunity, provided that we had one of the largest warehouse in the kingdom, in Riyadh City. So we had to capitalize actually on the last mile delivery services and expand our networks. We can't overcome the challenges because it's still there, but we are hoping to be able to do our best and overcome these challenges. We actually capitalized on the last mile delivery and expanded our network to cover recently to up to 100 cities kingdom-wide. So there are still a lot to be done, but we are very optimistic about it.
I'm going to circle back to a question from Miriam Elias, and I think it's an interesting question she's asking. People, we know how big cash and delivery has been in the region. It's a friction point. Has this situation resulted in more people taking orders through electronic payment, or whatever they're doing, Sadad, or they're doing cards, or has the cash and delivery remained what it is? It's just the scale of the whole transaction has gone up. So I think I'll really take your perspective, and maybe I'll circle back to Anthony on this one as well.
So cash on delivery actually been a challenge, yet the support for the local government here in Saudi to convert to a cashless society helped a lot during the process. So especially during the pandemic, I would say that we in Jolly Sheikh have developed a Jolly Pay payment solution to capitalize on this area of the e-commerce ecosystem, and I guess the result should be promising.
Anthony, what about you? Any less cash on delivery? Have people started using more cards online? Has that behavior shown?
Absolutely. I think the UAE specifically is moving ever closer to becoming a cashless society as multiple government initiatives have led to a sharp increase in digital transactions. I think if you look at the UAE specifically, and I'm biased just because I live in the UAE, it seemed like a country that was prepared quite well for something like this. If you look at all of the transactions you can do online to just go about your daily life, electricity, utilities, and so forth. E-commerce is just another avenue where that happens to be the case, and I think it's definitely beyond the UAE and in Egypt and in Saudi. It's encouraged those two countries, which are predominantly cash on delivery countries when it comes to e-commerce. Saudi less so than Egypt. It's encouraged both the laggards that maybe have an e-payment method on file but are more comfortable with cash. It's sort of maybe pushed them along or encouraged them to use payments, and after the first or second time they're like, maybe this is something I'm comfortable using. And then for customers that don't have access to an e-payment method before, it's maybe encouraged them to look at other e-payment methods. Sadad is certainly one where merchants accept that, but there are also some cool innovations in Egypt, here in the UAE with Tabi, where it's where it's a buy now, pay later kind of installment scheme. So there's a lot of really cool innovations that are happening in this space that I think are encouraging customers further along to a cashless moment.
But certainly a noticeable shift in comfort in doing electronic transactions. Yeah. Okay. Mazen, in your world, which is a different world, how are you seeing things? I mean, are you seeing when now people are coming in to put in established platforms with you, right, to open a small and medium, are they resourcing for this electronic payments at all, or are you still seeing cash on delivery as a primary model for people who want to build a business on the back of your business?
COD remains COD, but the C is different. And during that, it was card on delivery. A lot of courier companies refused to receive cash, and this was not by choice. The government actually enforced that into all courier companies to stop dealing with cash during the epidemic, and that's like what Riyadh said. It's a forced behavior change. So you have no choice but to use electronic means to pay. During that period, we realized that a lot of undiscovered or untapped solution by courier companies was explored. For example, you would receive a message before the shipment was on your way saying, hey, you can pay using that link on SMS. And you would land to a page where you can buy using the online page. Where was that before the epidemic? It was there, but it was, lost within this big organizations in the logistics company. So we saw that, pay before the parcel arrives or the parcel delivery guy arrives, card on delivery was an option. Account-based payment was hot thing like STC Pay and the alike, also was a good option during the epidemic. From what we saw during the epidemic and after that, a lot of merchants started or rushed to activate payment options like Mada, for example, which is the most adopted payment now method here in Saudi, which is anyone with a bank account would be eligible to do online payment. And Apple Pay. We noticed that the consumption of Apple Pay and digital payment grown by almost 40% during that epidemic. And after things went back to normal now, we realized that some merchants switched off the cash on delivery option after they realized the value of the operation, after they realized the value of the less returned items when you pay using credit card. So they started to get into the notion of maybe it was just a hypothesis that we could not stress test before the epidemic, that if we switch off the cash on delivery, we might not lose as much as we thought, or maybe our customers would be okay paying us online. This mind shift, I would say, during the epidemic, it's now being seen after that period, which is a great thing to have, and it goes nicely with the efforts that the government has done. For example, in Saudi Arabia, I would like to salute the Saudi government by waiving the fees of all of the digital payments during the epidemic on merchants. That encouraged them even to push people to use credit cards after and during the epidemic. So all of that resulted in more adoption, more usage, and also apparently more delivered orders, which is ultimate.
I think very interesting changes. I think if there's singularly one thing that I'm very excited by in what I've heard so far is this electronic payments, because I think this is the one-way route, right? Because once you've done the transaction and this is true conversion versus other category changes, which will obviously find their own stable periods when things, inshallah, get very good. All right, gentlemen, I'm going to shift to the next question, which is something we all understand about marketplace models. So I think just for the audience here, there's a whole range of models of e-commerce when it comes to goods, and I think we want to make sure everybody's aware and about that, right? So the very extreme end are small retailers. You can start your own website. Then you can go to platform as a service, which means it's like what Mazen does, what Spotify do. Then you can set up your store within a store, which is a platform, which like Anthony and Al-Walid are involved in with Amazon. And of course, at the very end, you could just list your product as, and the final one is the platform itself is a buyer and seller of goods, and they keep their own inventory. So there's a wide range of these options, but what is very clear and is across the world is that marketplace models dominate, right? Because they are aggregators. So there's always this little bit of a tension to say, do I have independent retailers setting up their own outlets and capturing value, or do I have a marketplace model which facilitates and actually provides value to the retailer? So, both of them exists. It's a decision which individual businesses make when they choose the model they take. So the question, giving this context, is, how can have smaller players emerge and become big in e-commerce? Is there a play you guys see? Of course, I understand each of you represent your individual industries and businesses, so feel free to take that discussion as you please. So same order, Anthony, you have a very interesting multiple plays in this model, and it'd be great to hear your perspective on it.
Yeah, I think, Abhijat, I want to challenge maybe the premise of the question a bit and then unpack it just a bit. Ultimately, sure. I think it's about whether a company obsesses about serving their customers and understands how to serve their local needs and preferences, regardless of what type of model it is and whether they're local, regional, or global. So if you look at the top e-commerce countries by size, it's local companies in Brazil like Mercado Livre that's, you know, dominant, or Hepsi Burada or Trendyol in Turkey that are recognized as the leaders in those countries, and South Africa and South Korea and Russia, which are also top 10 e-commerce countries. The incumbents are actually local players. Amazon isn't even in those countries. So I'd be weary to sort of think about a type of model or a type of player, be it local, regional, or global, that is dominant. But on unpacking your question just a bit, yes, Amazon is a marketplace. We have what is a retail model, which is where Amazon owns the inventory and sets the price for it, and a marketplace model where effectively we have selling partners who own their inventory and set their own price. And ultimately, Amazon is an online store. It's a store with multiple stores that operate within that store. More specifically, more than half of everything that Amazon sells, 53%, is from small and medium enterprises. That's at a global scale, and the percentage for the Middle East is actually fairly similar. So I would say that where we can, and maybe I'm skipping ahead to a question you might ask later, where we need to see greater support from governments is in helping foster an environment for small and medium businesses. And we've done some really good work. We've started to do some good work in the UAE at least, and this is something I hope we soon replicate in the kingdom with the Khalifa Fund for enterprise development. So we're rolling out an e-empowerment program for Abu Dhabi-based small and medium enterprises that has a lot of hand-holding and education to help effectively grow these businesses. So I think this is super encouraging, and I genuinely hope and trust that we as Amazon, amongst many other players, will continue to partner with these SMEs to help them grow on our store.
Sure, it's interesting. I think Anthony, the point is, as I said, these models exist. Global or global doesn't matter, and it's interesting. I think I'll shift this conversation to Riyadh. So Riyadh, you have as I said, an investor view on this, right? You are fully aware of the large players and the small players in any market. So when somebody comes to an e-commerce proposition which has this entire spectrum of models with obviously the dominance of marketplaces, and this is through the world, whether it's whatever brand it be, local or global, how do you see this?
I think there are models that are just, emerging also. Like we're seeing some models in Egypt, and I think they will happen in Saudi, where you have social sellers, people selling through a network of sellers. This was pioneered in India and Indonesia. I don't think there's I think as Anthony mentioned, there are different models, and ultimately, if this forced behavior, which is now becoming more of like a learned behavior or a preferred behavior, let's put it this way, what will happen across the various services and commerce types? Like, I don't want to focus only on retail because there's so much, right? So for retail, if we look only on retail, so there are segments of the population. Some of them will prefer to buy today. Before the pandemic, they used to buy things in a certain way from the local market, etc. They will, a certain model will be best to serve them versus other segments of the society. Not everyone wants the best price or the most convenient approach. Some people want the product type B or C that is, the cheaper product that is not necessarily sold on no brand name, etc. And if you look at Boutiquat in Kuwait and others, and what Mazen is doing with Zid and all these, you will see an emergence of this digital commerce that is not necessarily, like a marketplace versus not a marketplace. I think people are interacting with their local shop differently now. They're using potentially enablers such as WhatsApp, which were not designed for this. They are using, and there are tools, like there's a company we've invested in called Zbooni, which does social commerce basically, and they're seeing their numbers explode now just because everyone wants to serve their clients on multiple channels. So for example, the journey starts on Instagram and ends up on WhatsApp, and suddenly you want to send a payment link and you want to send an order receipt. And I think if you look at what Mazen is doing with Zid, they are actually doing a lot of this localizing all this experience, which I think brings me to open up a topic which we haven't addressed, which are the enablers. I think what on the back of what's happening, not only is delivery and the logistics, what you ask Anthony, but there's and payments with Al-Walid, but there's a lot of things happening, like enablers of commerce that were pioneered by the big marketplaces and the big online stores, but now we're seeing new needs emerge and new creative solutions to problems. So I think it's really exciting. And one area we are looking at as investors is the digital enablers of online commerce, if you want. And these are a spectrum of things. So it's good to look at like horizontally, but also go deeper in the value chain when we look at commerce and what's happening. And I know we don't want to add this B2B today, but also the way businesses are dealing with.
Just trying to keep it contained. Otherwise, you're absolutely right. It's a massive discussion.
For me personally, and for investors in general, it's really exciting time. I think the consumer at the end will win, because they will have so many options to choose from and so many different ways to do commerce. Eventually the consumers will benefit the most.
Sure. I just want to double click on one point you mentioned. You mentioned that enablers are also very interesting investment areas across the value chain. Would you like to discuss any one case just out of interest for the audience? What would that be? I mean, outside of course the obvious ones like digital logistics and payments.
So I mentioned Zbooni, for example, which enables social commerce basically. So if I'm a small seller, if basically I make custom T-shirts, or maybe larger, like a small store SME shop, and I typically market my stuff, my items on Instagram, right? And then I get direct messages, about price, and then someone makes an order, and eventually the conversation will go to a phone or to WhatsApp. Typically it goes to WhatsApp. And you have to manage, you have to manage basically product discovery, and then product, and then selling, the payment, the fulfillment of the order, sending this order to the back office if you want the operation, and then the courier company or you're the driver in the company doing it. And then customer care, etc. If today we've all had this experience where it's completely broken, and then someone calls and they don't have a continuation of the conversation they had with the person before. And Zbooni, for example, is doing that social commerce. But I think Mazen can elaborate the most on this. We're actually very impressed what Zid has been doing to localize basically some of these challenges in the Saudi context. I think he should have his opinion here.
Riyadh has been plugging for you, Mazen, so you have to say something. Khalas.
I totally agree with Riyadh. I mean, and also Anthony, it's not one player takes it all game when it comes to it. I always like to go back to the basics before. Let's assume that there is no internet, there is no e-commerce whatsoever. When the malls came in the market, they did not close the regular shop at the street. So same analogy can apply also to the marketplace versus the independent shop. Actually, one very well-known brand, Al Arabiya Al Oud, they sell perfumes, etc. They have stores at the street, and also they have stores at the market. I actually believe what should happen, and I encourage Anthony and Al-Walid and also Noon to do that, is to open up their APIs and enable merchants who has their independent store to sync their inventory and their catalog to be between their e-store and their account on those great marketplaces. Because what we want to end up doing, we don't want to replicate the work, especially the manual work.
Sure.
What's happening in the first world countries where, for example, players like us, Shopify, exist. Platforms like Walmart and Amazon integrates nicely with Shopify, and more than 50 to 60% of Shopify customers integrate with those marketplaces. So actually they complement each other. They don't compete with each other whatsoever. And that being said, with all of that, the percentage of what we should keep an eye on as players in this market is how many of those offline retailers or offline business are online. And I would say in very well-known countries like Europe and the US and Canada, they haven't reached 20% of that. So only 20% of those retailers are online only. So whomever who says Amazon will dominate the world and will eat the market and will get everyone busted, and actually they only control 20%. This is in the best case scenario. We are seeing now an increase. What happened in the epidemic will actually accelerate the growth and might take part of this pie, which is the offline versus online pie. We are seeing great use of making the consumer, as Anthony and Riyadh and Walid said, in the center of this experience. How can we leverage the online and offline to make the consumer behavior even better and serve them more? So if I would go to a shop and I like something, I don't want to carry the bags with me, I would ask the shop to deliver it to my doorstep. We are seeing that, the omni-channel and the multi-channel momentum now. This, I believe, what we should focus on. What we found after the epidemic, which is very interesting, if I want to zoom in one specific area, that we all saw how it failed the growth of the e-commerce, what is the logistics? And the logistics has been always an issue for any e-commerce player. So even if we did the best e-stores, even if the buyer or the seller provide the best product, at the end of the day, the moment of truth would be the last mile experience. So it might actually encourage people to buy again, or it might discourage them to buy again. One thing that actually annoyed me during the epidemic, that a lot of people who tried their first, that was first time to order stuff from very well-known brands, I don't want to mention names, but their first experience was horrible. And my worry is, and we should be all worried about, how can we get their trust again, gain their trust again in the logistics? And if you go back and talk to those retailers, they would all come to a conclusion, is that the logistics could not actually manage the expectation of the client properly. I'm not saying they should deliver in 1 hour or 1 day, but at least communicate with me in a way that's respectable and to manage my expectation. For us, for example, this epidemic pushed us to intervene. We tried to be only a digital platform, but we found that there is a gap in the market when it comes to logistics. We launched Zship, which is a shipping aggregator 2 months ago. We planned it for 2021, but we got accelerated. We accelerated the launch because there are many logistics companies in Saudi. However, the market is very, very fragmented. The merchants are suffering, the couriers are suffering, and the end consumer is suffering. Someone need to intervene to orchestrate the demand and the assignation around it. So far, the experience is amazing in ZChip. And we need, I believe, a lot of, I would say, enablers, not only in the end result or the e-store level would come, but also in shipping, in logistics, in fulfillment, in the enablement part will emerge during the Q4 and 2021.
Very clear. So Mazen, I think this is interesting. I think, I mean, and unexpected, right? I mean, if this is, you know, you can manage inventory, but getting that last mile and the logistics, which, you know, Anthony talked about, the rapid scale up required, use of third parties, which you have to. Unfortunately, none of us know what the plateau is, right? We know there's a plateau at the end of this curve. We know this plateau is going to be higher than where we are. That's why it's a plateau. We just don't know what that is. So I think it's a very fluid situation, to say the least. Gentlemen, I'll move to the next question. I'm aware we have 9 minutes to go. So there are 2 questions. I think the first one I'll focus more on Alwali than Mazen, and because this question is about entrepreneurship with nationals, right? I've known you, Mazen, for a while now, right? And we have met a couple of people who have, and a lot of people who you work with are wannabe entrepreneurs, or some of them have taken a big dive, right? They have become entrepreneurs. And I think there is a large agenda with Vision 2030 to crack the case on this, right? Because, you know, not all private sector jobs will be generated out of companies which will open in Saudi. And, you know, there's a versus a person who starts his own business and employs 5 Saudis, right? I mean, that obviously is a route which has to open up, while of course we want private enterprise to come. So it's a very big challenge. And I think that the question is, what are you seeing in terms of interest in entrepreneurship? Because these are also times which are tough. Jobs are tougher. You know, is some good coming out of it? Are you seeing more people wanting to start being an entrepreneur, as people who come to you, Mazen, who say, look, I want to do this too? Are you seeing this, or what are your views from your lens?
So let me break this down into 2 things: startups and entrepreneurs who wants to build a tech startup. One thing that I noticed, especially for Saudi startups, they go beyond now Saudi Arabia. We saw companies like, for example, us, that we have the appetite to go to Egypt, GCC, and we want to go beyond that, even to conquer Middle East and even emerging markets. Why? Because we had this great stress test for our model and operations. It helped us to be more optimistic, and we should. It gives us a kick in to be more ambitious. Not only us, I found a lot of companies to do the same. So thinking beyond cross-border and beyond Saudi. Second, I would say for people who are in the e-commerce, the retailers, some of the big fat retailers who could not survive during the epidemic, they will leave a space for those small people. A lot of people are rethinking their business model. Some, I've sat with a lot of retailers who were planning to open 30 to 40 stores. They are now not shutting it all down, but they are rethinking the budget, how to put it into e-commerce. And they've been validated this assumption during the epidemic when they started the e-commerce and started to see their model. The e-commerce is working for them. So, and on the other extreme, the notion of enablers, or not doing everything by yourself, but outsourcing or going into the platform, I would say, ecosystem, it's great. So I started to hear people coming to us, asking us, what can we do to build on top of Zit? Or what you can, us guys, outsource to us? And this is a great notion. I'm sure Riyadh would also be happy here, because it will encourage merger and acquisition. It will encourage smaller players got accelerated by acquisition, or also merging with other a merger with other startups to become even large enterprises. So those are the trends I'm seeing. I hope founders' mentality started to shift from doing it all by themselves to working together and making the pie bigger for everyone.
Riyadh, so this is a pass on to you. How are you observing this? How is entrepreneurship coming up? Is it is it accelerated?
Of course, especially in Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia has been on an amazing ride in terms of new startups and growth of startups. And Saudi Arabia, when you look at the companies, when by the time you hear of a startup, even us as entrepreneurs, and you look at the numbers they are doing, I'm always amazed by the KPIs. I think there's a lot of capable local entrepreneurs in Saudi that are doing amazing things, especially the last 2 years. And we're very excited about Saudi Arabia and the potential of entrepreneurship there, especially for models that are solving Saudi specific problems. If you look at what works in the US, it's not necessarily the same. It doesn't necessarily apply in Saudi or in Egypt, and what works in Egypt doesn't necessarily work in Saudi. I think Saudi and Egypt have a few major differences, but we've seen amazing things in both countries. But specifically, the last 2 years in Saudi, it's been really exciting to look at startups. Now, I have to say, it still is difficult for non-Saudis to appreciate and find, these gems in the making. So I'm always happy for referrals about, up-and-coming startups from Saudi.
Interesting dynamic.
May I add one quick thing, Abhijat? Here, my opinion on this is it's and I couldn't agree more with Mazen and Riyadh on. Just that there's an incredible amount of exciting Saudi talent that we see with Amazon, even with the SMEs that sign up week after week on Amazon and have started to build really lucrative businesses. But I think it's more about, and I think the government has a really important role to play in this, transitioning Saudi youth away from secure public sector jobs. That means reducing the switching cost to a private sector job or to an entrepreneurial path. And in the private sector world, it's not just the Saudi government role, it's the private sector working super closely with the Saudi government to help identify and slot talented Saudi youth for roles that we're trying to fulfill. That's in the private sector. But in the startup world, it's also sort of smoothing the economic decision that someone has to make in their mind about, do I go for this sort of secure public sector path, or can I really give it a try in this particular path? And that's where I feel there's good work that's being done, but there's a long journey ahead.
Anthony, I mean, I can't agree with you more. We've been having this discussion and the journey also with the ministry. And I think there's great recognition for this tectonic shift, for want of a better word, which needs to happen. Unfortunately, like all tectonic shifts, they happen very slowly. That's why they're tectonic. But fair enough. I think absolutely valid point. I'm actually going to segue to the last question on this one, which is all about government role. Right. And I'm going to pose this question in a different way. I'm going to ask the question to say, what should the government do and what should the government not do, right? We don't want to build false economies, right? I think it's important to highlight the fact that, in multiple digital sectors, when we look at the data and the stories of some of the governments, as positive as they were in terms of initiatives, also didn't lead to what I relate to some called transient economies. But when you pull the plug and you pull the support out, then those businesses don't sustain or hold. Now, there's obviously a failure rate in every business. The question hence is, and I restate, what do you think the government should do? And what are the possibly governments, what would be your advice government should avoid doing if they want to build a positive play in this sector? So I'll go with the full roster on this one. Anthony, why don't you take a stab at this one? What's your view?
In truth, I'm more curious to hear what the other panelists have to say on this topic, but maybe two things I would say are, when it comes to domestic selection and sellers, continued investment in SMEs and in small entrepreneurs to be able to grow their e-commerce businesses, I think continuing to provide the framework for that is super important from a government perspective. And also thinking through that, you know, if we really want to make this region a true e-commerce hub, it's really thinking through some of the more draconian measures we have on tax regimes, on import restrictions, on customs. There's a lot of red tape involved in this space in terms of import export. And I think we have really good partners in the customs authorities that are, you know, they're willing to lend an ear, make us a partner, and it's a journey. But the more we realize that easing these restrictions means more and better selection and better prices and better competition for customers and sellers, the better the outcome is. So I would encourage governments to really think through how to have e-commerce players here be a partner, to think through some of the regimes that we have on tax, customs, and import regulations.
Okay, noted. So Mazen, I'm going to pass you the tough one. What should governments not do?
They should not get very excited to the extent that they will compete with the private sector. This is always, people sometimes get excited, especially in the government sector today, especially that here in Saudi, a lot of those today, the change makers who are in the government, they are a private sector, they are ex-private sector. They would get excited to the extent that they want to do it themselves. No, please don't. Just enable those private sector and SMEs to do it all, and enjoy watching them making it.
Sure.
And encourage them. I cannot forget when we reached our 1 billion milestone riyals in Zed, how I did not ask him. He did it, and I have to give him the credit. The minister, MCIT minister, Mhandis Abdullah Swaha, he actually retweet, and he actually salute us in front of all people. He said, "Good on you," and that's what we need. We don't need intervention. We need incentive, encouragement, recognition, and I would also be a little bit I would be a little bit aggressive and ask the government to be aggressive a little bit to become unfair with those digital champions. We saw it happening in China, where the government gave unfair subsidy and waivers to players like Alibaba, and that's what made Alibaba is Alibaba. Same happened to Jolly Sheik and a lot of Chinese-based companies like Shein and the alike. They've been given a lot of waivers and subsidies, especially for cross-border commerce. We need the same here for local players. We are not asking for protecting the local player, but to encourage and also to incentivize local player to do so. So we would like to see more subsidy, incentivizing and encouraging local player to the extent that they make it even compulsory for people to go live online. This is what I would love to see, and what I don't love to see the government.
Okay. Walid, any perspective on this? What, outside of the points which are already mentioned, what would you like governments to do or not do?
Well, it's actually more like a dilemma, you know, when we're talking about conventional business models against the digital economy that we are shifting towards, and yet there is a fine line that we need to distinguish between the possibilities, as Mazen has mentioned, and the not to get very excited about certain, let's say, endeavor that could still hinder our ability to deliver the value that we want to achieve. I'm seeing tremendous effort has been done so far in Saudi. I hope this will continue for years to come, inshallah, so we can get the value, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala. So that's all what I have to say.
Okay. Riyadh, investor view on what governments should do or not? Same question.
Yeah, no, I think the governments some governments aren't doing anything and some are doing a lot, like in Saudi. And I think what they have been doing over the past years by coming up with regulation to regulate some of the new, electronic businesses like e-commerce. There's a new e-commerce regulation, etc. I think they've been very helpful on this part, irrespective of, nothing is going to be perfect, but basically allowing, companies, giving them the right boundaries to operate within is very helpful. Also, encouraging international companies to open. Saudi has been doing a lot to let people in certain categories open up businesses in Saudi without having, any local owner, etc. But also the enablers that the government is working on, like, encouraging payments, like, providing data to allow people to do businesses to do background checks for example, online lending, credit, etc. A lot of things are happening in Saudi, and it is exciting. I think that in general, the government intervention in Saudi has been really positive, especially from where Saudi was from, like a government and business law point of view when it comes to doing business in general, let alone talking about startups. So other things have been helpful in my opinion. Now, I think ultimately the government wants to protect the customer and the consumer, because there can be a lot of abuse or potential abuse when it comes to online businesses. It's an easier way to scammers and fraudsters, and even businesses, good businesses, to offer a poor experience or to abuse sometimes their customers with the experience. So the government should focus on the goal of the government should be protecting the end consumer, but also enabling businesses to do business in an easier way, whether through facilitating payments, whether through opening up, making it easier to open a business, to get the right licenses, and finally through sharing of data, information, like what some of the players are doing, governmental and semi-governmental, in terms of data on car history or on crime history. All this you can pull it easily now in Saudi Arabia and offer, for example, a car loan, or offer like a personal loan. We have seen this exponentially improve in the past 24 months probably.
Yes, interesting data when Saudi jumped 30 positions on ease of doing business. It's still data, but it's quite amazing. You have
trust me, we have seen it as investors, and I'm sure Al Walid and Anthony and Mazen have seen it in practice. I don't know. This is my
lot of change.
Fantastic change. And I think on the closing note, it's all about the customer. We all know that, and I think on the government bit of it, is going to be a very interesting act when the Saudi government faces exactly the same regulatory issues which all governments around the world face when it comes to electronics, as to how to help the customer being protected, at the same time how to make sure that that transaction is legit. There are a lot of very sophisticated people who want people's money, but I think everybody's getting better. With that note, gentlemen, and 10 minutes over the time, thank you all very much for this session.
Thank you.
I really appreciate your insights and the time given. Thank you very much.
Thank you all.
Bye.
Abhijat.
Bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye, everyone.